Good morning, good morning, good morning. We are back for another episode of the Buckeye Roast here with my guy Pat Cahill of Menace to Sports. Pat, how you doing?
Doing good, man. Getting through the week slowly but surely. It's a bye week, so nice and chill. But yeah, we're going.
Yeah, emphasis on the slowly, man. It's only Tuesday of this bye
Oh
week, man.
man,
I was just reading an article this morning and it was like the Buckeyes will be back in 11 days. And it's like, man, I can't even believe it that we have to wait that long for Buckeye football. It's like we've waited all off season for the year for the team to return. They return, they look like world beaters, and they take them right away from us. We are on a bye, and man, I don't know. I'd say there's plenty to talk about, but I'm not so sure. We're going to get into it today about what all there is to talk about with this team. I wanted to start with we're on a bye week. Not much to complain about. We go through the first 2 weeks of the season, avoided major injury. We talked all off season about wanting to see a rotation and make sure that we're developing our depth this year. And I feel like the Buckeyes have done a great job doing that. And we saw them correct mistakes from week 1 to week 2. Are you surprised by the way the Buckeyes have gotten started this season?
I wouldn't say I'm surprised. I think with the amount of veteran leadership that you had coming back to this team, it's no surprise that they got off to a quick start. They all know what's at stake this year. They all know, what the end goals are. So I'm glad to see them come out the way they have. And like you said, I mean, the rotation, which has kind of plagued Ryan Day the last few years, it's been great. Getting people in-game action early on in the season and plenty of reps. I think it's been as good of a 2-week start as you can ask for if you're a Buckeye fan.
Absolutely. I've been trying to. I was asked a question on the postgame show. What is your biggest criticism of the Buckeyes? And I am still struggling through 2 weeks to come up with something that I'm truly concerned about with this team. Do you have any concerns through 2 weeks with the team and what you've seen out of them so far?
I mean, from what we've seen, no, but yeah, I'm sure there are concerns about how we will look when we play a legit opponent. Obviously, we're 2-0 against two MAC schools that really haven't, shown us much. Once we get into those, even, hey, Michigan State's 2-0. Once we get into the Michigan State and the Iowa game leading up to the Oregon, that matchup, I think that's where we'll see, all right, where do the concerns truly lie with this team? If there's any sort of area in which we struggle in those first two Big Ten games. But right now, I mean, we've played almost perfect football through 8 quarters. So it's not, can't really find much to complain about right now.
You see Iowa take a tumble in week 2, lose a late heartbreaker to Iowa State on a last-minute field goal. Does that change how you feel about Iowa going into that matchup at all, or did you expect them to be undefeated coming into that matchup?
I mean, I did. I expected them to win on Saturday. However, regardless of their record, that they're going to be a good defensive football team. So that's where I'm still excited for that matchup to see, what this offense and specifically what Will Howard looks like in that matchup as the final tune-up before the Oregon game. Obviously, he's looked great through 2 starts, and he's done everything that we've asked of him. Hasn't made any sort of wow plays, but that's fine. We went into the season knowing that we didn't need him to make wow plays. We just needed him to control the offense, control the tempo, keep the offense, in rhythm and not turn the ball over. And he's done a good job of that. I think the Iowa game will be a good test for him to see, all right, let's see if he can maybe make some plays and make some bigger plays, than what we've seen through these first 2 weeks.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been searching for a few days. Our guy Gojo says in the chat, if there's not a critique, don't force a critique. And that's kind of where I'm at. The
Ain't
only
broke, don't
one
fix it.
Exactly. The only thing that I can really think of as far as a critique is you'd like to see someone establish themselves in that tight end room. And that's probably something that I want to keep my eye on going forward here. And I'd like to know what you guys think in the chat. Do you guys think someone takes control of this position, or do you think that we see a tight end by committee the rest of the year? You have a young, promising guy like Jelani Thurman. We're still waiting for him to make one of those explosive plays. We saw him get a few catches in the spring game, and we've been getting meaningful reps in the past 2 weeks. No no catches yet. You do see G and Will Kazmarek get involved last week. G had a tough penalty that brought back a huge Quinshon Judkins run. Do you think that there's someone in that room capable of becoming the leader of that room and becoming the starter before the end of the season? Well, becoming the main guy before the end of the season. I shouldn't say starter because, I mean, with the way they're rotating, how fair is it really to call one of them the starter versus the other?
Yeah, I think I think you hit it right on the head there. I think Jelani Thurman, if there's going to be a guy, it's going to be him later in the season if he continues to progress as the season goes on and gets more reps. We haven't seen much from him through 2 weeks. I just don't know. I keep waiting for G. Scott to have this, breakthrough moment, but it's just as week and week goes by, I just don't know if he's the guy. And I hope that Jelani Thurman makes a wow play over the next couple weeks so that we can go into the Oregon game kind of feeling a little bit better about that room. But I don't know. That's definitely the biggest area of concern right now.
Yeah, I mean, I've struggled for a couple days now to come up with anything that and I hate to I'm so used to watching this team with such a critical eye as far as the championship expectations, and we've talked about it in years past. It kind of takes away the joy of the wins on Saturday when you have such high expectations for your team and you're constantly critiquing them through a national championship lens. And every time you're watching the game, you're saying, well, that wouldn't work against Georgia, or they're not going to get away with that against a better team. It seems like for the first time in probably since the Justin Fields era that the Buckeyes aren't playing with their food. They're going out there and not only handling business, you're getting 2 and 3 deep in handling business. The fact that the Buckeyes were able to rotate as much as they were in the third and fourth quarters last week and still not give up a first down on defense speaks to the depth. And that's something that this Buckeye team has been missing in years past when you talk about not only defensive deficiencies. I mean, we had deficiencies with starters. You're talking about now going 2 and 3 deep into this roster. And years past, you couldn't even imagine taking one of the starters on the field off the field, and you saw the drop off when that happened. And now we're not playing with our food. We're putting 2s and 3s in and still getting the same level of production that we were getting out of our first team defense. How surprised are you with the way the Buckeyes are handling their opponents and not necessarily messing around and really handling business each week?
Yeah, I mean, it's comforting. Like you said, we haven't seen this probably since the Justin Fields days, but that's what made Ryan Day, it's kind of what a lot of Buckeye Nation fell in love with him when he first started coaching or as the head coach for the Buckeyes, was that he would go out there and steamroll opponents, kind of different than, Urban Meyer would have these, he was not that he was afraid to run up the score, but we would rarely see the beatdowns in the Urban Meyer days the way we saw in the beginning of the Ryan Day era. And now I feel like we're slowly getting back to that after the last few years of inconsistency from him. But I think it's, again, I'll point to the fact that this team is such veteran leadership on both sides of the ball. And again, they know the task at hand. And I think it's all business for them. And that's why they're even those 2s and 3s, they know what's at stake, and they know, if they want to get playing time, they're going to have to match that energy from the first team. And I love it, man. This team is just, it's fun to watch when they, you can see the collective goal as a unit is to just make this a true natty run and go out in historic fashion.
It seems like a team that's truly on a mission and is very focused on their goal. I feel like in years past, you would see just them trying to figure out who they are. In 2021, it was kind of, we don't have a defense. We have a first-time starter, a quarterback. It's trying to figure out who CJ is as a quarterback, what this defense is going to be under Kerry Combs, and then he ended up losing play calling duties. Then you bring in Jim Knowles, and defense is still trying to find its identity. People talked about how aggressive Jim Knowles' defense was, kind of bit them early on in that year, in year one under Jim Knowles, and then in year 2 under Jim Knowles, you really see that defense take a step forward. Guys significantly more comfortable in it, but then you're banged up at linebacker. It feels like this team is finally all coming together, and it's like, it's almost unsettling as a Buckeye fan because, in post-COVID, it seems like it's constantly been patching holes and trying to hide blemishes with the team. And right now, it feels like this team finally has it right.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it is a little unsettling, and I still feel a little, unsettled just because I'm just so used to having something not go our way. And again, like you mentioned earlier, we've avoided major injury through 2 games, which is huge. And injuries are inevitable in football. So, what I've been and we've been talking about it all morning so far, but the rotation and getting guys in, it just makes me feel less unsettled than years past where, all right, if a starter goes down, I don't know what to expect with the guys coming in. And that feeling has gone away this year through 2 games, I know, but the way the 2s and the 3s have come in and played really well, it's like, all right, when and if injuries do happen, which again, they're inevitable in football, right now I feel comfortable at a majority of the position groups that the next man up can do their job, and we won't see that much of a drop off.
We talked a lot about the depth and rotation, and we talked about the tight end room, about someone stepping up and taking control of that position. You see Cody Simon come back this week, gets a sack early on, looking like himself despite the injury that held him out week 1, but it seems to become more and more apparent that Arvell Reese has to play more. Sonny Styles looked good in his will role this past week. Cody Simon comes back and looks like himself. How do they find a way to get Arvell Reese reps, especially as these snaps become more meaningful against bigger opponents as we move into Big Ten play? Do we see that rotation shorten up, or do you feel like Arvell Reese through 2 weeks has asserted himself as someone that absolutely has to play significant, borderline starter snaps for this team, because it's starting to feel like this linebacker position is going to have to be running back by committee because all 3 guys demand playing time, and you even saw some 3 linebacker packages out there on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, I love seeing 3 linebacker packages out there. I hope they continue to roll with that moving forward in certain downs. But like you said, you got to keep Arvell Reese on the field. He's been I feel like, and all of Buckeye Nation knows it. He's been the most pleasant surprise through 2 weeks, and I can't even say surprise because this kid is just a freak of nature. And I think Jim Knowles and Ryan Day understand that, and they've seen it through 2 weeks, and they'll find ways to continue to get him on the field. But again, it's a good problem to have because I was afraid with Cody Simon coming back this week that if he didn't look the part, then maybe, all right, well, now I don't feel good like with rotating these 3 guys. But with Cody Simon coming back and looking, as good as he did, I think it's just promising that whatever combination of those 3 that we're going to roll out, I'm going to feel strongly about. And I just hope that Arvell Reese, maybe he won't see starter snaps, but I hope he sees, a step below that. And I get that Sonny Styles and Cody Simon have earned that role as the starter, but man, you can't keep Arvell Reese on the sideline for too much longer during games.
I agree 1,000%. I feel like that's someone that's going to absolutely demand minutes and continue to develop right in front of our eyes. And it's exciting to see what James Laurinaitis has been able to do with that team. And it's crazy to think about back to 2021, the biggest deficiencies on that defense, linebacker and cornerback. Both of those feel like positions of strength on this team. We talked earlier outside of tight end. It feels like the Buckeyes have it pretty much figured out across the board. And again, I feel like we say this guy's name almost every episode. The fact that we have Austin Sareveld playing already at left guard, and he is the first person in the class of 2023 out of all of those linemen to get on the field, and we're seeing potential, because that was one of my biggest concerns coming into the season. Yes, we have an offensive line that we thought we were going to be fairly confident coming into the season with, but I was thinking a little bit ahead of next year. It's like we have a lot of guys that still haven't gotten game starts, tons of game rep at the offensive line position. And that's not really a position that you want a lot of inexperienced guys taking over taking over next year and having to rely on the portal. So the fact that they're getting a guy like Tegra Shabola ready to go and a guy that should be available on the line again next year, Carson Hinsman, we've already seen him start. He might not be a starter this year, but we know he's been a starting caliber Ohio State offensive lineman. And then a guy like Austin Sareveld may not be able to retain that position once Donovan Jackson comes back, but a guy, again, that we know and we've seen as a capable starter. Having the peace of mind of knowing that there's at least 3 guys that we've seen go out there and do it that are available to come back next year is reassuring, especially at a position that I was concerned about as far as depth going in. In years past, we heard during spring and fall training camp, hey, we don't have enough bodies to rotate through, or we're not able to get reps going with our twos because our two offensive line isn't able to hold up. But you haven't really heard that in years past. You actually hear Ryan Day saying there was a little bit of struggle when they had the virus going around, but they were still able to manage and get guys a ton of reps. And I think that's going to pay dividends going forward for this offensive line.
Absolutely. It's huge to get offensive line depth and rotation early on in the season, just see what these guys can offer and give us a little peace of mind, like you said, especially, and knowing that Donovan Jackson's, on the verge of returning, hopefully after the bye week. It just makes me feel good. Again, if a guy goes down, you don't want to see it, but if a guy goes down throughout some point in the season, we've seen enough guys, get some significant playing time early on to feel at least a little bit comfortable moving forward.
We asked for questions in the chat, and our chat has come through. We have two of them that I'd like to get to before we keep moving. Oh, here's a third. So our first one, we don't usually talk about transfers a bunch on this show, especially predicting guys leaving. But our guy Dylan asks, who do you guys see transferring at the end of the year if they don't see the field more? I had two people in mind. Well, a position group and then another person. And I feel like that person has made the most of their time when they've got on the field. And the more and more that I see them play, I feel like it's a guy that's going to stick around and try to make a name for himself here. And you saw Gabe Powers make a play in week 1. You saw him making plays in week 2. All the hype around Arvell Reese, a guy in Gabe Powers who was a top 100 recruit, one of the top 5 linebacker in his class, high hopes coming in. And then Arvell Reese, it feels like maybe has jumped him on the depth chart, but Gabe is making the most of his minutes every time he gets in. And that was a guy maybe preseason when I heard all the Arvell Reese hype, and then maybe even a little bit leading into week 1, thinking that, hey, if this guy got passed on the depth chart, I don't know if he's long for Ohio State, but the way he's been playing, that absolutely looks like a guy that is going to play at Ohio State before the end of his career. So not really a guy that I think is going to transfer, a guy that I maybe thought might if he didn't get minutes coming into this season, but the way he's playing, he absolutely looks like an Ohio State linebacker that's going to be challenging for minutes within the next year. So, and then the other position group is, the Ohio State wide receiver room is one of the most loaded position groups in all of college football, and that's one that you'll always have to keep an eye on. So those would be my two areas to keep an eye on, linebacker and wide receiver. But again, with the way Gabe's playing, I wouldn't see a need to go anywhere because it looks like he's on pace to see the field.
Absolutely. That's a great point on Gabe Powers. He's looked great through 2 games so far. And like you said, wide receiver was my first thought. Looking at the depth chart right now, like you hope neither of these two guys leave, but someone like Mylan Graham or potentially Bryson Rogers could hit the portal if they don't feel like they're going to see increased minutes next year. Obviously, you're only losing Emeka at the end of this season, so you're going to have like a pretty loaded room returning, especially with JJ Carnell and Innis. So maybe you see one of those guys bounce. I hope we don't, because I think receiver depth is important. And like we saw with Jameson Williams, important to rotate guys, and we don't want to see those guys go to Bama or anywhere else and ball out. So that would just be the receiver. The receiving group is the position that I would look at in terms of who is the biggest potential to transfer.
Yeah, shout out to our guy Dylan for the question. Emily here with, how do we match up with Marshall? A bit bigger of a test. Haven't heard much. Pat, have the numbers told you anything about this Marshall game that we should be concerned about more than any game that we've seen so far this year in Western Michigan or Akron?
I haven't looked too much into Marshall yet, but I would be shocked if they give us any sort of issues. Through 2 games, they lost by 17 to Virginia Tech, and then they blew out Stony Brook, who that doesn't even really count as a college football team. But, against Virginia Tech, they weren't able to move the ball or through the air at all. Their quarterback was 13 for 36 passing. So if they're struggling to move the ball versus Virginia Tech, I have a strong feeling that they're going to have a really tough time moving the ball against our secondary and also our pass rush. I mean, there's nothing here. There's not much that I see here. Just looking a quick dive into the numbers. They have this one running back who rushed for 100 yards versus Virginia Tech, but only on 6 carries, so a big play back. So I don't know. I have a hard time believing Marshall's going to cause us any fits. I mean, people said that Western Michigan was going to cause us fits because of how they played against Wisconsin in week 1, and that was put to rest early. So I truly believe that this team won't really have a test until Oregon. Maybe you see it against Iowa if that defense is for real, as they usually are. But I'm not worried about Marshall, especially with an extra week to prepare.
Yeah, exactly. I just hope that they don't come out sluggish and lose that bit of fire that they seem to have coming into week 2 as far as a need for a quick start. I wouldn't really worry about that matchup. I would just, again, keep an eye on the things that we talked about correcting going into week 2 and making sure during that bye week those concepts don't get lost and they bring that same level of energy and that quick start into that Marshall game. My only concern would be making sure that they look sharp and aren't shaking off rust coming off a bye week and just come back in with that competitive fire, having a bye this early in the season. Pat, you brought up the biggest test being Iowa before Oregon. You see Iowa go down last week. Is there any chance that Michigan State game pops up and actually ends up being a tougher matchup than Iowa, or is that wishful thinking for Spartans fans?
I mean, it's been 2 games, so it's kind of hard to tell, but Michigan State doesn't look that bad. I mean, that freshman receiver, Nick Marsh, I believe is his name, he looks really good early on. He's been graded out as one of the highest, freshmen in all of college football alongside Jeremiah Smith. And you had the freshman receiver from Nebraska too. The Big Ten is low-key loaded with freshman receivers so far through 2 weeks. But Michigan State, I always get PTSD when we play them because I feel like at least during the urban years, they always played us tough. And again, that was at the peak of their powers with D'Antonio and the lockdown corners that they had in that defense, the no-fly zone. But in past years, we've kind of taken it to them. So I hope that trend continues. But I don't know, new coach, they might be a little fired up to play the Buckeyes. I still think that the biggest test before Oregon is Iowa, though, just because I want to see how Will Howard looks against an Iowa defense.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how this offense matches up against a better defense. A little bit of housekeeping. There are 300 people watching live. We appreciate all of you tuning in. A shout out to our guy Dylan, who was the first in the chat this morning and also tossed us a question early this morning. So big shout out to Dylan. Only 11 likes, I think I saw on the video with 300 people watching. We need to get those up. So if you are watching on YouTube, make sure that you smash that like button. If you are on Twitter, make sure you throw a like on the video and also retweet. It helps us a ton. And look at that. Boom. The numbers are just growing. I just want to get your thoughts on this, Pat. Something that we had seen from Jim Knowles' defense in the past, and it plagued the Buckeyes against Michigan in years past, was the explosive plays. It felt like the Buckeyes would be able to play sound defense, and then they would have these mental lapses and give up a big play. And when we talked about the Akron preview, you proposed that the Buckeyes keep Akron under 6.5 points, I believe was one of the numbers that you gave or something like that. Mm-hmm. And I said, I'm just nervous about the Buckeyes giving up an explosive play, just a mental lapse, a missed assignment, and you just see a guy running free in the defense. We have yet to see one of those huge mental lapses, big plays from the Buckeyes. Do you feel like that's something that Jim Knowles has been able to resolve with this defense and with the comfort in this system that those are less likely to happen?
Absolutely. I mean, this is year 3 of the Knowles defense era, and a lot of these guys have been here for 3 years already. So it's ingrained in them. And I just think that it's truly a testament to all these guys coming back and having that same goal. And they know that as a unit, they're fighting to be arguably the best in program history. Hell, even talked about in terms of greatest defenses of all time in the sport. And I'm sure that's playing a factor in like, all right, no, we're not gonna fuck around against an Akron or Western Michigan. Like let's take care of business and own this top defense role that they're trying to cement their legacy in.
Absolutely, and I love the defense. Kind of being the identity of this team, it feels like this year. Even while Ryan Day has been known for his explosive, high-flying offense, we have a guy like Jeremiah Smith, who is the number one player in his class at wide receiver. And it still feels like defense and toughness is kind of dominating the theme of this team, especially after a few years of people questioning the toughness of this team and calling them soft. To see them come out with a vengeance and taking a defensive identity is great to see from the Buckeyes.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think
we have another question.
Going back to your roots there.
Absolutely. We have another question from Woody. How much do you think Chip has shown percentage-wise of his play calls? We saw more the second game. I think we have only seen 20% of the Chip playbook.
I would
you have
agree
a percentage
with that.
of Chip? Yep.
Yeah,
I would agree with about 20%. You definitely saw him start to mix it up more, and it was funny. I was watching the Steeler game on Sunday with my cousin, and he's saying, "Oh, these play calls are so ridiculous, this and that." I'm like, "Do you watch modern football?" Because like this is what football looks like today, and to see Chip really mix it up, like even the Jeremiah Smith touchdown, you see the film breakdowns of the stress that puts on the defense. The cornerback had two responsibilities. Once Will Howard saw that they were in zone, and he could either cover Carnell Tate coming across the formation or jump on Jeremiah's route. He chose to sit on Carnell, and then you see Jeremiah Smith take it 70 yards. And you just see people raving in these film breakdowns about what Chip Kelly has done just in this short amount of time to the Ryan Day offense. And like Woody said, you can see the difference. While it's still Ryan Day's offense, you see Chip Kelly's imprint on it as far as the misdirections, the motions, making the defense think more, and you can feel that the defense is almost half a second slow with this offense. But I feel like Chip is just starting to get into his bag. I don't think he's really I feel like the stuff that we saw on film was more of getting guys comfortable running into the game more than it was, I need to show something for Western Michigan.
Absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head there. Obviously, you don't want to show your hand too early in the season, especially against lower level opponents. But it's important to get these guys comfortable, like you said, with the motions, the pre-snap motions, and all the misdirection, getting them comfortable so that it's not a new thing once you actually implement more of that play calling into a game against an Oregon. So I think it's important. I think it's been fun to watch early on. Obviously, the product is working. So when this thing reaches its full potential, it's scary to think about what this offense can be capable of.
Absolutely. Shout out to Woody for the question. Another one from our guy, Bo. How do we feel about the matchup against Nebraska? I'm going to expand this question out a little bit, Pat, because it kind of goes into where we were headed on the outline. I have which team worries you the most in the Big Ten, and I guess we will also hit on this Nebraska game as well as we talk through this. The teams that I listed, Oregon, USC, Michigan, Nebraska, and Penn State. And right now through 2 weeks, I'm not sure of those teams which one I'm the most concerned about. I thought preseason it would have been Oregon, and putting the rest of these teams in there would kind of be disrespectful to Oregon. And through 2 weeks, I'm looking at this list, and I'm not sure if it's Nebraska or Penn State who concerns me the most this season. I don't want to get disrespectful to Oregon, but are they still your top concern going into this season, or at least challenger in the Big Ten from what you've seen on film? I know Penn State struggled a little bit with Bowling Green. Drew Aller and Trey Wallace kind of getting things going. Nick Singleton running a little bit better. Penn State's offense, if Drew Aller is a different quarterback, does give me concerns. I do think the Buckeyes will be able to take advantage of that defense. So I do think they'll be able to still get it done against Penn State. And then again, you know how I feel about number one overall recruits. Dylan Raiola leading the Nebraska Cornhuskers is always something that'll worry me about a guy that is just truly talented reaching into his bag and pulling out a miracle game, kind of like a Rondell Moore type of experience. So I'm right there with Bo. I mean, I don't know if Bo's actually concerned, but he is asking about Nebraska, so it might be creeping into his mind. I am a bit concerned about that game, and I think that is a matchup that I thought would be a blowout and a lesson to Dylan Raiola about spurning the Buckeyes into you guys better come in here ready to play, because this Nebraska team seems like they might be for real.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to evaluate Oregon through 2 weeks because if you look at their roster, and it's shocking that they've struggled versus Idaho and Boise State early on. So I'm still worried about them. However, if we're just going based off of this year's results, it's 100% Nebraska for me. I think they look clean early on. They've taken care of business. I mean, again, I'm not going to overhype Colorado any more than most major networks, but they've got NFL players on that roster. It's not a total slouch, so not a total waste of time. And, they made Shedeur Sanders uncomfortable. Obviously, he had the big interception that kind of turned the tide for Nebraska. The point, I feel like because that game is home, I feel more confident. If that was at Nebraska, seeing the way that atmosphere looked on Saturday, that would be a little more worrisome for me. But a true freshman, Dylan Raiola coming into the shoe, I hope that's a night game, especially if both teams come in undefeated, because Nebraska's schedule works out the way it does. And if Ohio State takes care of business, that could be two teams coming in at 7-0. If that's a night game for a true freshman on the road against the team that you decommitted from, that's going to be a tough matchup. So I think I'm still going to go with Oregon overall as my biggest worry early on, just because that game's on the road. I feel like it's only a matter of time before Oregon snaps out of it, which is concerning to me. I feel like they're kind of hitting their wall early on in the season, which is, I guess, if you want to struggle, you'd rather do it early on than later in the season. So if they figure it out come October 12th, then I'm more worried for that game than Nebraska. But I think Nebraska is number 2 then on my list, because Penn State, I mean, we know the story with James Franklin. Until he can prove to me otherwise that he can coach in a big game. I know that game's on the road as well, but
at Penn State, I mean, you're talking, and I mean, you brought it up with Nebraska, and I feel like it's something that we should get into before we wrap up with these questions. You talked about the Nebraska game day environment. I don't know about you, but when I'm putting together these thumbnails and things for the show, I'm constantly looking at pictures of stadiums and things like that. The big house, Nebraska, the light shows that they put on, the things that they're able to do for their night games. You look at a Penn State. What's going on at Ohio Stadium that these schools are able to put on a better game day environment than the Buckeyes, at least as far as an in-stadium experience? And let us know in the chat. I'm not an Ohio State season ticket holder. I was not born in Columbus. So I don't know how you guys feel about the current game day environment. I see people complain about it all the time on the timeline. Buckeye fans, let us know in the chat. Do you want to see a more ruckus game day environment like you see at a Penn State, like you see at a Nebraska? The DJs going, the light shows, the EDM blasting, all of these different things going on during the pregame, during the game. It feels like the Buckeyes still have a 1990s game day experience as far as in-stadium entertainment. Would you like to see the Buckeyes amp it up, add the light shows, add the in-stadium DJ, those type of things to really increase the environment? And then even the scoreboards, you see people posting pictures from inside Buckeye games, and if you're on the opposite side of Ohio Stadium, the scoreboard's just a giant white blur. And it's crazy to think that a program that makes as much money as they do, a football program that is as profitable as it is, doesn't have a scoreboard that you can see on the opposite side of the stadium.
Yeah, it was funny. So I was at the home opener against Akron with a couple friends from Jersey who came out for the weekend, and we sat on the opposite side where the only scoreboard visible was that tiny little speck, and my friends were like, "Damn, that's really small for Ohio State. Like we weren't expecting that." And I was like, "Yeah, it's weird," but I'll never forget the first time I was ever in the shoe was the match against Oregon in 2021, early September matchup. And I'll never forget the atmosphere when the game first started was electric, and it drove me crazy. And you just brought it up. The stadium DJ was lacking just big time. And you see the clips of like Penn State playing Mo Bamba on Michigan's first possession that leads to the timeout. You see the clips of Alabama going absolutely ruckus with the light show and stuff. And so that's what I was expecting. Again, it was a noon game, so I get that that's a little different, but that's what I had built up in my head as to what to expect when I enter Ohio Stadium for the first time. And the DJs, like the choice of music that was being played in certain positions, I'm like, damn, we can really do better than this. And I feel like it's maybe slightly improved since then. I've been to a handful of games since, but overall, yeah, let's go all out. Let's bring in the light shows, the EDM, that kind of music. Get the stadium really bumping.
Yeah, Gojay says Ohio State has an older fan base, diverse in age. Leave it like it is. And that's why I wanted to get Ohio State fans' opinion on this, because I see a fairly similar sentiment when it comes to the shift that we're starting to see with the Ohio State social media team. Because, I mean, if you look at some of the comments, you have a lot of people excited with the shift in the music that they're using for highlight plays and things like that. And it seems like it's more modern. And you also have people complaining, like, what is this music? I don't like this. And it's like that duality of, are you serving your fans and the younger generations of people that you want to be future Buckeyes and recruits, and you want kids to say, hey, that program's cool, I want to play with them, and also protecting tradition and the people that have been through multiple eras and have seen what was cool 15 times over come into style and go out of style. So it is a delicate balance, especially with a program that has so much rich tradition and history to change and pull it in a different direction. I'm kind of like, leave it up to the fans that are in the stadium. I know the people that go to the games week in and week out love the environment. You saw Gojay talk about, the tailgates being great. I mean, there is no better one. It's one of the best tailgates in all of college football in Columbus. It's just interesting to see how the game day experience will evolve, especially with some of the things that you're seeing other universities pull out, even with the attention that Prime has been able to bring to his program with just the theatrics on the sidelines and pregame and things like that. How attractive is that to young recruits and the players that you're trying to get to come play for your team? So just wanted to get your thoughts and some of the chat's thoughts on the game day experience in Columbus. One more question from our guy, Big Earn, before we get out of here. What do you think about the Jim Harbaugh commercial where he makes fun of the Michigan scandal? Pat, have you seen the Jim Harbaugh?
No, I haven't seen that. Is that new?
Yes, it just played. It played during the NFL this past weekend.
Shoot, I totally missed that. I'll look that up.
Well, regardless, even if you've seen it or not, your thoughts on Jim Harbaugh making light of the scandal? It seems like the Michigan fan base, and Jim Harbaugh in particular, seems to be unfazed by the criticism and everything being levied against this program. Even now that he's gone, feels comfortable. You heard in the offseason Jim Harbaugh potentially being a guest captain for the Wolverines at one point this season. He doesn't seem to be shying away from leaning into this. Hey, yeah, I cheated. Do something about it. I'm in the NFL now. Do you feel like this just speaks to the hypocrisy of the entire Michigan identity of a Michigan man and doing things the right way? Because it seems like they were so critical of every other program that may have cheated, that it may have broke the rules or done things in a way that they didn't feel like was the Michigan way. And they always were the first ones to jump out and criticize and point a finger. And now to see them lean in and throw out all their morals to clamor and hang on to this national championship, how hypocritical is it by this university, this team, this fan base to lean into this cheating scandal after proclaiming to be the moral standard for the sport for how many years?
Yeah, I think they're leaning into just being the true villain. I feel at this point, I feel like maybe they know that, all right, this whole thing's going to blow up in their face soon enough. So why not just lean into it and create that whole, mega villain persona. It's just, we've seen this from Harbaugh, like the constant backtracking throughout the years, saying how the NCAA is corrupt because they didn't want to pay players for the longest time. And then, we go back 3 years ago. You said the same thing about not wanting to pay players because they're students first, not athletes. And so it's just like everything he's done in the past few months has just been backtracking on where he previously stood. So I'm not surprised by this nonsense. I'm going to watch this commercial once we're off air. I'm curious. I can't believe I missed this the other day.
Yeah, man, they're definitely a bunch of hypocrites up there. You see our guy Johnny Olden in the chat. The chat was looking for you the other day. They said, why are they hiding Johnny now that his team loses? And they made us listen to him talk his shit before they had lost a game. Johnny was live yesterday while we were live. We'll have to get him on the show if you want to hear his thoughts. I saw him being pretty critical of his defensive coordinator on his channel. So if you guys want to check that out and enjoy Michigan struggles, make sure you check out our guy Johnny, and we'll get him on the show here soon to talk about the current state of Michigan. We appreciate everyone for tuning in. We set a new record for most viewers that we've had on an episode of the Buckeye Roast. We are currently over 500 people watching.
Let's go.
At the moment. If you are watching on YouTube, make sure you smash that like button. If you're on Twitter, make sure you drop a follow. If this is the first time seeing the show, like, retweet. We appreciate everybody tuning in to this episode of the Buckeye Roast. Q's vacation is coming to an end, and he will be back tomorrow, but a big thank you to our guy, Project Pat Cahill of Menace to Sports, for filling in for Q for the past 3 days and absolutely crushing it and holding it down while Q was on vacation. Can't thank you enough, Pat, for showing up and hanging out with me for the past couple days and doing the show while Q was on vacation. Absolutely. Let the people know where they can find you. I don't know if you're going to want to do a Friday show with us being on a bye week and already having done 3 straight shows, but if you want to come back, Pat will be here Friday. But yeah, a couple more shows left this week. Pat, let the people know where they can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, why not we run it back Friday? We'll give the people what they want. Some more betting advice, maybe. Some more
you guys have been absolutely on fire with the bets. If you're not watching the best damn college pregame show on the Menace to Sports platform with me, Chris Drew, and 20 of our closest friends, make sure that you tune in, because if you would have been betting with Chris and Pat the past 2 weeks, you would be up a ridiculous amount of money. And I'm not a big gambler. I'm not the one that promotes other people's gambling picks. But the way they've been smacking picks on the show, like, it's one thing to text your friends or tell people that you bet something, but to get on camera and have the streak that these guys have had has been incredible. So if you guys are into gambling, make sure you check out Friday's show. Make sure you check out the pregame show. Hopefully we still have some more picks and can stay on fire even with the Buckeyes on a bye week.
Absolutely, for sure. I'm looking forward to it.
And let the people know about your pod, Pat.
Yeah, so follow Menace to Sports Monday through Friday, live at noon. You won't be able to see me, but you can hear me. I'm the voice in the background that chimes in as the producer.
That was not the podcast I was talking about, Pat. You have another podcast where you're the star of the vehicle.
That's true. We got so it's on the Menace to Sports channel, the Laugh Track Trio, me, Chris, and Ainsley. We do a podcast every Friday that normally we record on Fridays, then we put it out on the weekends. But just us talking about life, talking about a little break from the Ohio State football scene, and just come hang out and laugh with us and listen to our funny stories of how we live our lives, basically.
Absolutely. So if you're not getting enough of Pat on Menace to Sports, if you're not getting enough of them here, make sure you check out the Laugh Track on the Menace website and become a member over there. So not only can you get more Pat podcasts, but you can also get Pat's cousin Mensa's picks. So make sure you check those guys out. But yeah, we are gonna get out of here. It is 9:00. Your boy got to get to work. If you want to find me, you can find me at 2Ts. It's 2_TEES on Twitter. You can find me here weekdays for the Buckeye Roast at 8 a.m. on the Best Damn Media platform. Saturdays on the Menace to Sports platform for the Best Damn College pregame show with Chris Drew. And then Saturday post games on the Bleacher Report app, again with Chris Drew. And then, of course, the flagship Buckeye BS Sundays at 10 a.m. And if you haven't checked it out, make sure you are checking out the Fans Edge on Wednesday, our national college football show with our guy, Mike and Terry. We appreciate everyone for tuning in. We appreciate the chat for all the questions. And man, loving the numbers, especially in the bye week, man. Hope to see you guys all tomorrow for another episode of the Buckeye Roast. And you guys know how this ends. Go Bucks and OH.
I-O.
Yeah.